presidency has announced a review of the millions spent by the South African Police Service on vehicles for President Jacob Zuma's wives over the last 4 years. Earlier this week, Police Minister Nkosi Ntleko revealed in Parliament that a sum of a tune of 8.6 million rand of the South African Police Service budget has been used to buy luxury vehicles for the President's wives over the past 4 financial years. Now, in response, the presidency on Friday announced that it will discuss harmonization of benefit policies for the President with the South African Police Service. The discussions with the South African Police Service will take place as part of the ongoing review of benefit policies within government, informed by the depressed economic climate. The discussions will take into account the transport benefits of spouses of serving principals and also those of former presidents and deputy presidents.
The presidency has approached the South African Police Service for a discussion on the harmonization of benefit policies, so that they are in accordance with the cost containment measures that President Zuma announced in the State of the Nation address and the Minister of Finance elaborated in his budget speech. We are facing a difficult economic climate, and President Zuma feels quite strongly that the government must respond to the difficult economic climate by cutting wasteful spending and making sure that we are quite realistic about what we can do within the resources that we have.
Now, joining me in studio to further unpack the story is Setaki Kgomo, who's a political analyst, as well as Monique Tauta, a national campaign coordinator from AfriForum. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps start with AfriForum. And what were your reactions when the revelation came out?
Well, AfriForum filed a complaint with the Office of the Public Protector. According to the Constitution and the Public Protector Act, the Public Protector has the power to investigate any conduct in state affairs that is suspected to be improper and to report on the conduct as well as take the appropriate remedial steps against that. So we hope that the Office of the Public Protector will do an in-depth investigation into this matter, and then hopefully we will find out whether the conduct was indeed wasteful, if the expenditure was wasteful, and if it was, whether the money should be paid back to the budget of the SAPS, and as well as whether there should be limits set to the benefits given to the President and his wives.
Monique, the cost here seems to be an issue for AfriForum, is it not?
Yes, of course. In February, the Minister of Finance announced that there will be a great decrease in government expenditure as we are in times of poor economical growth, and that tax will be increased. But what we're seeing now is that, well, what we want to ask Zuma is whether the increase in our taxes was to pay for the benefits of his wives. Why do you need 11 cars for 4 wives? In this year alone, 3.6 million was spent on 5 luxury cars for his wives, and this is unacceptable.
Now, joining me on the phone line is Akele Mbele, DA Shadow Minister of Police. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. What were your response when that startling revelation came out from the Police Minister with regards to his answer to you?
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for the time. Well, I mean, our immediate response was one of shock and dismay because it was such lavish spending and completely over the top. If you consider, as the previous speaker was saying, it's basically at least 2 cars per wife over the last 3 financial years. I mean, it just boggles the mind as to why that is, why that's needed. If you consider that these kind of cars have got, you know, long working lives, and you can get cars at the cheaper end of the scale that still meet the need for security and comfort and decency. So they could have slashed that expenditure by at least 50% by 1, buying fewer cars, 2, not buying at the high end of the luxury markets. And we have to ask the question, what about the cars they were using from the previous term, the first term of the president? Surely any cars bought between, from 2009 would not need to have been replaced by 2013 when the next purchase happened. So it's a slap in the face for the public and for taxpayers who are feeling the squeeze of having to tighten their belts with food inflation, rising unemployment, and low economic growth. And yet we see the elites feeding at the trough and indulging themselves at our expense.
Zahi, now a lot around Zuma, and one would say Zuma is beleaguered at this point in time, the spy tapes, the Constitutional Court ruling, now this. What type of narrative does this paint for the ruling party?
Well, I don't think one can overstretch this matter to mean anything further than that. First, there is no quarrel on principle. There is quarrel on substance. I think it is, in terms of principle, accepted that there should be spousal benefits. I don't think anybody queries on that. The query probably is that let us look at whether, in terms of substance, that which is spent for vehicles for the spouse of the president is reasonable within the culture of the austerity that the country has entered into in view of the economic climate we find ourselves in. You cannot overstretch it to say that it says anything to the president, because there is no reference that the president had any hand in terms of determining whether the 8.6 million rand should be spent on the vehicles or not. What we hear is that the South African Police Service had acted in terms of providing those. The principle, therefore, is correct. The substance, perhaps, is something that has to be looked at. And it is pleasing that they now talk of harmonization, and that from the president's side says that let us look at how you do the harmonization of that which is fair in terms of the providing of that required transport to the spouses of the president. And that you have to do, in my view, by benchmarking with similar circumstances of spouses of presidents elsewhere in the world. You can look at Nigeria, you can look at Zimbabwe, you can look at any other country, you can look at the US, and confirm the principle, and also confirm what is actually regarded as equitable and fair, in order that you maintain the same standard of providing the transport, the locomotion for the wives of the president. So that, I would like to now pointedly say to you that one should not over-exaggerate any smaller issue to mean that there is crisis in the presidency or crisis surrounding the president. There is that tendency which somebody should actually say, what are we talking about here? Why do you then have to attach President Zuma on each and everything? I don't think in this respect he has got a direct hand. SAPS has something to deal with this matter, and hence the call for harmonization.
DA, I'm going to go back to the DA. You say that you will submit a written parliamentary question to President Jacob Zuma, as well as write to his office to seek clarity as to whether he had any knowledge of the purchase. As we've seen with most questions that are tabled to the president, people don't really get the adequate answers that they want. Perhaps your response to that?
Well, my response is that I think, as you rightly said, we can reasonably expect that we won't get a clear answer, or we'll get an answer saying that the president was not aware of or did not play a part in that spending decision, which is actually exactly the problem. We have a crisis of dysfunctional leadership. President Zuma is not at the tiller providing clear and visionary leadership for the government. We saw in the case that resulted in the Constitutional Court's finding against him that he had broken his oath of office and acted against the Constitution, is that he actually doesn't know what he's doing. He's not able to discern when he's getting wrong advice. Things are done very ad hoc. Only now we're going to be seeing this review. And we're going to put in questions and ask about the timeline for that, because we know how the government tends to drag these things out. So you don't actually get any urgent and real resolution of the issue. But each of these instances are symptomatic of the deeper rooted crisis that is the dysfunctional leadership of President Zuma and his ANC, who've hollowed out our state institutions and are acting in the name of elite self-interest and greed. So, quite frankly, the solution here is to replace the entire thing, get a new government in, and show how a DA government would do better to cut corruption, create jobs, and bring the change we all need.
Now, Monique, how strong do you feel you have a case here, and what perhaps are your desired outcomes?
Well, firstly we looked at the presidential handbook, and according to this handbook, the SAPS is responsible for the procurement of the vehicles of the president and his wives. But what we have a problem with is that the purchasing of these luxury vehicles was made possible because there are no limits set to this. So we hope that there will be limits set to these costs. And also the President's comment to review the transport benefits given to his wives is not sufficient. If you look at what's happened the past few years, it is clear that they are not capable of managing these expenses. So we strongly believe that there should be clear limits set to it, so that it can be clear white on black, black on white, sorry, and yeah, so that this can't happen again.
So, Saki, one might argue and say that, look, the president is playing a strategic move now by coming out and saying he will review the transport benefits of his wives, and now including presidents and deputy presidents. Would you not perhaps feel that that was a slightly strategic move for the president?
Well, I think it is part of the operations of day-to-day government. After all, the government has been sensitive to what the importance of responding to the global economic crisis that impacts also on South Africa, and hence the instituting of austerity measures that the government drastically is presently engaged in cutting unnecessary expenditure in various levels of the government. And this should not be an accidental thing. It is just part of that which has to be done by government. As to whether that justifies the involvement of public protector of anything, that is up to interested parties to prove that. But at the end of the day, the need for austerity measures cannot be overemphasized. It's agreed upon. That's why earlier on I said this is the fact that the wives of the president need transport is a principle nobody can quarrel with. What we can quarrel with perhaps is the size of the benefits that they get in the light of the austerity measures that have been implemented across government, and that affects everybody that actually benefits from the fiscus of the state.
Zakele, are you happy with the president now coming forward and saying, look, he will review the transport benefits of his wives and that of former presidents and deputy presidents?
Well, my main comment would be to say that it's too little too late, and it's been another sort of showing of the slip about the deeper crisis and the problem we have with governance in this country. If I may actually add to what the other guest said about that there's no quarrel over principle about spousal benefits, there actually is a quarrel. If I may give you an example, when the DA came into power in the Western Cape in 2009, we immediately reviewed the provincial ministerial handbook that governs benefits. We set a cap for the vehicles, the kind of vehicles that MECs would be entitled to, as well as stipulating that they must maximize on the working life of the vehicles they inherit. So we actually already have a principle, frugal, no-frills government, so you can maximize the spending you do for job creation, for service delivery. And also, in addition, if I may just add, Premier Zilla's husband, who is her spouse, does not receive any government-sponsored benefits. He drives the old Skedonk Toyota vehicle, family vehicle they've had for years, because it's not necessary for spouses of the executive, unless they're carrying out government beneficial work, to still suck at the teat of government without there being benefits for the public and for the taxpayer in that money being spent.
All right, Zakele, I'm going to hold you there. Monique, your closing comments.
Well, the question is, when will we be able to stop asking President Zuma to pay back the money? Is it really our responsibility to set financial limits to the presidency and to governments? And when will the government start to take responsibility for themselves?
All right, thank you very much. In studio, I was joined by Setaki Khomu, political analyst. Thank you so much. Monique Tauta, thank you so much. National Campaigner Coordinator for AfriForum. As well as on the phone line, I was joined by Zakhele Mbele, DA Shadow Minister of Police.